So this is based on the true story of Elvis's meeting with Nixon in December 1970. It's a story which is, been very well told and pored over by people who are Elvis fans. Elvis, in a state of some distress and through a circuitous route, left his home, went to D.C., went somewhere else first, and turned up at the White House insisting that he wanted to meet the president on a matter of national security. The White House were completely in a tiz. At first, they didn't know whether to take it seriously. Nixon didn't know what on earth was going on. They said, no, seriously. He checked into the hotel as John Burroughs. He was there with Jerry Schilling and Sonny West, who he sort of rounded up en route, and he was determined to meet the president because what he wanted to get was a badge, a federal badge, which would make him a federal agent at large for the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, because one of the things that Elvis did, all Elvis fans know this, is that he collected badges from police departments, but not toy badges, proper honorary. So he held a number of sort of honorary police badges. So this is what he wanted. He wanted this federal badge to be a federal agent at large for the BNDD, which was something which no one was quite sure whether or not that position actually existed. So the White House was in a tizzy because Elvis turned up, wearing the cape, doing the whole thing, and carrying a box which had a presentation gun that he wanted to give to President Nixon. And Nixon's aides then said, you need to have this meeting. And he said, really? There are all these internal memorandums in which Haldeman says, you've got to be kidding. Really? And so finally, they decided it was a good idea because, hey, look, Mr. President, he's really, really popular and you need some popularity. So if you meet him, the popularity will rub off on you. And the meeting happened. Now, the conceit of the film is that really, because this was before the whole Watergate bugging, there is no tape of what happened. There is, however, a pretty thorough memorandum by Bud Kroger, who wrote down afterwards what was said, and there's the eyewitness accounts of Jerry Schilling, who was there at a later point. Kroger was there during the meeting itself. However, the conceit of the film is we don't really know what went on, so we're sort of going to make it up, and we're going to sort of take certain liberties with the meeting. Here's a clip in which we have Elvis played by Michael Shannon and Nixon played by, as you've so well set up, Kevin Spacey.
I was telling one of the gals outside, it reminds me of my Graceland.
Oh, it does it? How many square feet is this Graceland of yours?
Not sure. 10,000, maybe?
Well, that is a fine size for a home, isn't it? Well, it's more than fine. Of course, the White House here is, I think, about 55,000 feet, something like that.
Well, actually, I've made a few additions, so maybe a little more than that, but I don't think it's the size of a man's home that defines him, M&Ms are my favorite.
Oh, mine too. So, Mr. Presley, how can I help you?
And how he can help him is that he wants the president to give him a badge, which the president doesn't initially know.
Why does he want a
because
badge?
How long have you got? Okay?
Well, just a couple of seconds.
The short version of it is that he wanted to be made a federal agent at large. One answer to this story is that he had met somebody else who had been made a federal agent at large, and he wanted to know why he couldn't have that same badge. The other thing is that he collected law enforcement positions and badges. Another one is that it theoretically would have given him the right to do things that believe me, the answers are infinite. And actually, the film doesn't go very far to explaining what they are, other than Elvis was a bit kooky. And the funny thing about the film is that actually, if you read the memorandum that was written immediately after the meeting about what happened, it's weird. It's weird, but in a kind of just the facts way weird. So some of the things that are strange about it are the fact that Nixon kept repeating that Elvis had to be careful to retain his credibility. He's recorded to have said this at least 3 times in a meeting which wasn't very long. That Nixon told Elvis told Nixon that he'd been playing Vegas and it was a really hard gig, and Nixon said, "Yeah, I know." And as Bud Kroger said, how would he know? When it was the last time Nixon played Elvis? So there are all these kind of strange details, but actually what the film does is it decides to go in a much more sort of goofy fashion. So we have the inevitable karate demonstrations. We have that stuff with the M&Ms and the Dr. Peppers.
Inevitable karate demonstrations?
One of the things that Elvis used to do is that he did...
You know far too much about this.
Well, I know. Here's a joining of the waves. Bill Blatty, who wrote The Exorcist, was in a hotel once, and a call came over the tannoy, you know, Mr. Blatty, please go to reception. And it was Elvis who was staying in the hotel and said, you know, would you mind coming up? And so he thought, I'm going to meet Elvis. So he went up and he met Elvis. And I said, what was he like? He said he was lovely. He showed me some karate moves. And that's what Elvis did. He liked to show people karate moves. He didn't do it in the Oval Office, but the film fancies that he did. And so the film plays everything in a kind of big sort of pantomime caricature in, you know, of the president and the rock star. This, incidentally, is a story which has been approached before and things like there's a TV movie from 1997 with Bob Gunton as Nixon, called Elvis Meets Nixon. And the whole thing was meant to be a secret, and then the photographs were released, and it became the most requested photograph from the archive. And there's an hour-long discussion on that was done by the archive, which I just watched the other night with Jerry Schilling and Crow talking about their memories. I mean, it is something which is it's better recorded than the filmmakers want you to think that it is. So in a way, since the original story is so odd, it seems strange to me to make what's basically a fairly broad comedy out of it that takes so many liberties with the truth. That said, Michael Shannon doesn't have the physical or vocal heft of Presley, but what he does have is the hand gestures. He gets them down pat. When it comes to Spacey and Nixon, I mean, we've seen Nixon done by so many people. I mean, John Cusack played him in The Butler, and, you know, obviously Anthony Hopkins played him in Nixon. And one of the things about Nixon was that he was so caricaturable. The shoulders, the arms, the awkward arms, the jowly sort of gorilla stare that he had. It is something that it's almost as easy to do an impression of Nixon as it is to do an impression of Elvis, because there are these kind of key ticks that everyone thinks of as that's Nixon. It's like Edward Heath in the shoulders. It's not that complex. But what Spacey does, he plays it fairly broad. There is one lovely moment in which, because Nixon is so awkward, he tries to be chummy by patting one of his aides on the back, and he kind of fumbles it. And it's a lovely, small, low-key moment of detail. There are also sort of scenes of, you know, pathos and self-reflection. There's Elvis talking to himself about the death of Jesse Garron just before he goes into the meeting with Nixon and being nervous about Nixon. There's Nixon whining about his own sort of his own background, and then realizing during the meeting that actually he and Presley have a lot in common because they both came up from nothing. And he actually says that. And for me, the pleasures were in the lower key scenes, the more incidental detail. The time that he goes off because he wants to go and get a snack, and he goes out to this local eatery. This is actually inspired by a thing that genuinely happened when Elvis went into a donut shop, but. And it's a much lower key scene, and it's those lower key moments that for me worked. I mean, I thought the film was fun, and I think the performances are kind of playing that chalk and cheese comedy thing up as much as is possible. The awkwardness of Nixon, the strangeness of Elvis. I still think that the story itself, the true story itself, is so bizarre that actually nobody needs to be embellishing or playing with the truth. Then again, I mean, Johnny Knoxville is in this film. You think Johnny Knoxville was in Grand Theft Parsons, and boy, was that a film that messed it up by taking liberties with the truth. So it's not historically accurate, but it doesn't really claim to be. It is good fun. I think that it could have been stranger, but I kind of enjoyed myself all the way through it. I certainly, you know, I like the characterizations and I like the idea of it, but I just think there's a strangeness. There is a just the facts strangeness which has been lost in taking such liberties with it and making it into so much more of a sort of broad comedy. But that's probably just me.